not be a Dr. Martin Luther King night if we didn't have sleet, snow, cold, etc. And you folks are just so faithful. You come and you respect and honor the legacy of Dr. King. And I also have to say at this point, we have a wonderful contingency of members from People's Baptist Church in Boston. And our guest speaker was a walk-in deacon at People's Baptist. And our music is going to be provided by the People's Baptist Male Chorus. Oh, and I go to People's Baptist. But anyway, I just thank everyone for coming. I do appreciate why you are here. You're here to honor the legacy of Dr. King. Sow what you want to reap. To reap a good harvest in your life, start with sowing seeds of goodness. Not from Dr. King, but from one of his favorite Gospels, the Gospel of Mark. You know, Dr. King is first Reverend Dr. King. He was a reverend first. And he was a man that would always say to you, I did not just come by this, a bolt of lightning hit me. He said, I just had a strong urge, a strong feeling, a strong pull from God that said, you have to work with humanity. And that he did. This is our 37th annual Dr. Martin Luther King program. Boston, they had their 50th breakfast today. But to think that this man has commanded all of your attention for all these number of years, it just goes to show you how important he was to you, how important he was to humanity. And of course, we have that wonderful sculpture there at, on the Boston Common, because he and his wife were a part of the Boston scene. We claim him. Before we have our invocation, I would like for you folks to feel free to enjoy our refreshments. And also, if you didn't come in the front entrance, would you kindly leave that way and take a look at the display cases that were done by the students from third grade, I believe, I was told, until up to grade 12, who they used the theme, you know, you cannot get anything or gain anything through darkness. You have to let in the light. And that was their theme. And they've done a wonderful job. I want to make sure that I give the appropriate credit to the director of visual arts, Leo Mulner, and to the director of, it's in your book, and I'm going to have to look at the book, I'm sorry. The Michael Kuzak, the director of history and social studies. And then I have a list of the teachers that worked with the students. It's good to have director of this or director of that. But you know, the rooster may do the crowing, but you know the hen lays the eggs. You know, so it's always, I don't mind highlighting the directors, but I also would like to give credit to those people who were doing the work with the students. Crystal Powers, who was our elementary social studies coach. And the following teachers are our visual art teachers: Sam Bulger of the Bishop School, Deborah Campagna, the Thompson School, Deborah Fleming, the Harding School, Stacy Greenland, the Dallin School, and Molly Atrazek, I murdered that, Atrazek of the Pierce School. And so we'd give them a round of applause, please, for what they, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. When you see it, you're going to be very impressed. So let us start our program, the invocation. Father Robert Archon from the St. Athanasius the Great Greek Orthodox Church. I called Father Robert, or as he calls himself, Father Bob. I called and I asked him if he would be so kind, because it has been a while since the Greek Church has come to give us our benediction or our invocation, and I asked if he would kindly come this year, and he said yes, he would. Come right up, sir. And I have to tell you about this whole program. This whole program is an act of God, because we had three beautiful women who were leading this program for the last 2 years, and each one of them got pulled away from this. They just didn't have the time because they have new careers. So it was suggested maybe we should let this program wait for another year. And I thought, no, that's not a good plan. We need to go forward. But so my husband was ill and so forth and so on. But I said to God, with your help, we can get this done. So just take my hand, pull me through this, and I'm sure we'll make it. I called Father Bob. Yes, it would be my pleasure. I called Pastor Goodman. Yes, it will be my pleasure. Now, I called some other churches too, but they had some other things to do. So I told them I'll hold them off until next year. Aren't they going to be surprised when I call them? and even Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson, you're going to hear from her shortly. My daughter Melissa, I said, I don't have a speaker. I want someone. Ma, why don't you call Kellie? And I said, oh, I don't know if she's going to want to be bothered with us. And she says, no, let me call. Let me give her a call. Kellie just embraced our program, and I thank her profusely for that. So now we have a speaker, we have the clergy, now we need music. So I was sitting in church, and here comes our male choir. And I thought, gee, they pulled themselves together quickly. They haven't been singing together that long. They've been in the mass choir. And then when I heard them, I says, oh my God, they have to come to Arlington. And God said, yes, they will. It took Marcia a few weeks to get used to the idea, but I am so grateful that she said, yes, we will come and support you, Sister Pearl. I says, all right. So God was just in front of me through this whole thing. And Garfield, while he was in the hospital, he was getting better. So it's all just good. It's God good. And I hope you accept that testimony from me. Father Bob.
I normally don't do this, but I think she deserves a wonderful round of applause for putting together this wonderful program. Thank you, Pearl. Thank you. We are a people used to praying, are we not? Praying in church, praying before a meal, praying when we get up and rise in the morning, and before we repose at night. But today, this evening, our prayers demand to be more. I believe it is always needed to be much, much more. There are unsettling days and unsettling times, violence and hatred littering every corner of every conversation. So we must remember the work and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and honor the past. Let us pray like this so that we can continue to bend that long arc of history in the direction of God's kingdom and shape a future which we will be proud to hand to our children and our grandchildren. So tonight, today, let us pray not just with our words, but also with our hands. Let us pray not just with what we say, but also with what we do. Let us not just pray with what we dream and intend, but rather with our witness of our lives and also with our feet on the pavement. Let us pray not to implore God, who already holds out before us that grand dream of God's kingdom to come, but let us also pray to remind ourselves and to remind each other who we are and whose we are, and especially who we are called to be. Let us pray not saying, Lord, hear our prayer, but pray so that we might become change agents of God's prayer, and in echoing and embodying the silent witness of the angels who so recently proclaimed peace on earth, God's will to all. Racism has rightly been coined America's original sin, whether it be shown in marginalizing Japanese Americans to internment camps, Native Americans, Indigenous Americans to forfeit their land and their culture, or Black Americans brought to our lands as slaves. It remains a blot on our nation's life. It is a sin and divides the human family, blot out the image of God among us, and violates the very fundamental dignity of those called to be children of our same Heavenly Father. Heavenly Father, God of all creation, in your divine providence and wisdom you have called us, your sons and your daughters, to be living witnesses to your truth, love, and justice in this world. You give us the grace and strength to be instruments of your mercy and compassion in a world that is often filled with hatred, bigotry, and indifference. We bow before you today, O loving Father, in remembrance and thanksgiving for the life and legacy of your faithful servant, witness, and martyr, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We thank you for his time among us, however brief it may have been, for his example of meekness and courage, his inspired words and writings, his integrity of life and integrity of word and soul, for his prophetic leadership, yes, my beloved, prophetic leadership, and authentic leadership and witness, which somehow eases the tragedy and pain of recalling the brevity of years. We rejoice in the fact that his life and legacy has endured over these past 56 years, since the very dark day in April '68, when he was taken from us by an assassin's bullet. We rejoice in the fact that Dr. King continues to inspire millions upon millions of people today, all over the world, people of every religion and creed, people of every color and ethnic heritage, young and old, rich and poor alike, to rise above themselves, to realize that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And more importantly, dear Father in heaven, we ask you, mold and fashion our memories of Dr. King into a guiding vision for true and active discipleship, so that under your grace, we too might be a lasting effort upon this world in which we live. Dr. King once said, "We shall have a choice today, nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. We must move past indecision to action. We must find new ways to speak for peace and justice throughout the developing world, a world that borders on our doors. If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time, reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without sight." Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the light and bitter, most important, beautiful struggle for a new world. A widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. This is a great new problem for humankind. We have inherited a big house, a great world house, if you would, in which we have to live together. Black, white, Easterners, Westerners, Gentiles, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Hindus, a family unduly separated by ideas, cultures, and interests, who, because they can never again live without each other, must learn somehow in this big, grand house to live respectfully and kindly with one another. In a sense, we've come to our nation's doorstep to cash a check, as Dr. King once said. When the architects of our republic brought and wrought this magnificent words of their Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall his heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable right of liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the black people a bad check, a check which has gone back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse, my beloved, to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation, and so we've come to cash this check, a check that is given upon demand of the riches of freedom and security of justice. That is what I hear Dr. King's prayer, a cry for strength to carry out the world of peace and justice, for justice not to be nonviolent, come with May, for the blessings of the movements of civil rights, justice, peace, and healing for the oppressed and the oppressors. Thou, immortal Father, out of whose absolute power and infinite intelligence, whose universe was formed, we humbly confess that we have not loved you with all of our hearts, our minds, and our souls. We have not loved our neighbors as you have loved us. We have too also often lived our selfish impulses rather than by the life of sacrificial love which you revealed. We often give to receive. We love our friends and hate our enemies. We go the first mile but dare not travel the second. We forgive but dare not forget. And so too we look into within ourselves. We are confronted with the appalling fact that the history of our lives is the history of an eternal revolt against you, our beloved Father. But you, O God of mercy, have mercy upon us. Forgive us for what we could have been but failed to be. Give us the wisdom to know your will. Give us the courage to do your will. Give us the devotion to love your will. Amen. God bless you.
You may applaud. And all the freedom fighters said, Amen. Okay, we are off to an excellent start. Dr. King would approve of us starting in that manner. Oh, free will offering. So, this is something I do every year. When you have a chance to read your program, you'll see that I was one of the original organizers of this Martin Luther King birthday observance. Some 37 years ago, I sat down with a group of like-minded people, and we started this Martin Luther King celebration. We originally thought we would have it at the First Unitarian Universalist Church because they have a church hall. It's not very large, but we thought, well, we probably won't have a lot of people, so we should have it there. As the planning grew, we soon found out that several people were interested in coming to honor Dr. King in Arlington. So we moved it to the First Baptist Church, which has a huge reception hall in the basement. And we were just flabbergasted by the response. Franklin Jennifer, I believe, was our first speaker. And so ever since then, as I am flabbergasted this evening, it's about 7 degrees out there, and I am flabbergasted this evening that every seat is taken. But so 37 years ago we started this, and we have always had a free will offering. We have never had an admission. I have to, I know you're probably wondering why I have changed not I by myself, but the committee and I have changed the process of giving. And that's because at this point in time, 37 years later, the expenses are more demanding than we've had in past years. So I thank all of you that have taken this economic journey with us, and we will continue with our free will offering. This is something that Ann Mathis, who we're going to honor this evening, this is something that Ann Mathis always did. I don't know, you've taken the baskets, but she would get the baskets, pass the baskets along, and you just do whatever you wish to do, and we appreciate whatever it may be. So I think you can do that quietly enough. I should have asked Marcia to play something for us during this process, but I didn't, so I don't want to do it now. So Neil Osborne, who was the past president of the NAACP, the Mystic Valley branch, where I'm also a member. He is going to conduct this part of our program, which is to honor Ann Mathis. And he will tell you about Ann. Ann was also a member of the NAACP. She and I also sat on the Superintendent's Diversity Advisory Board. And in addition to Ann, we also lost another person that was a great supporter of the Martin Luther King program. That's Jane Howard. Jane Howard and Sherry Menton, they bonded, and Paul White, and we formed, what did we call it? The Arlington Community Choir. And they performed for the Martin Luther King program for 2 years. Jane was quite a musician. She sang in the choir at MIT, and she did an awful lot to help us with that process. So I would also like for us to remember Jane this evening. Jane passed earlier. No, not earlier this year. She passed earlier last year. So Neil, would you come and do the honors? And Okay, oh, there you are, okay. And we need to ask those very dear friends of Ann's to come up because they're going to work with Neil and they're going to do a tribute. Barbara Bolts. You with us? Barbara's, well, Emily Winja. Ms. Milan. Charlotte.
So I'll begin. Good evening, everyone. And Pearl, thank you very much for your wonderful, wonderful service. I don't know what celebrating MLK Day in Arlington would be without your energy, without your vibrance. We adore you, and that is why we so celebrate you each and every day. Good evening, everyone. I've been asked to take a moment during the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's life and legacy to take a moment to honor one of our committee members who has passed, Ann Mathis. While she is not here physically with us, it is what she has left behind for us to carry forth. A dedicated individual who was always there, willing to do the work that is necessary to put this event on. An event that has taken place for 37 years happens because there are individuals in the community that say, this day is important. It's important as we build community here in Arlington and surrounding towns that we remember the sacrifices that those individuals have made so that we can live in more harmony. Now, we know we have more work to do, but in doing so, we want to remember those individuals who gave of their time without asking. It is because they wanted to do it, and it was a cause that was important to them. One of many Dr. King's quotes is, he has said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Ann answered that question every day for her actions and her heart. We're taking a few moments to tribute and provide her a tribute to her life.
Than Ann Mathis, though it's bittersweet that she's receiving it posthumously. Ann worked tirelessly for peace and justice and against racism, both in the community and at First Parish UU. Ann was a citizen of the world, and after 9/11 became an active member of UJP, Arlington United for Justice with Peace. Perhaps you saw us standing at the corner of Mass Ave and Mystic Street, holding signs protesting the war in Iraq. That war ended, but other conflicts followed, and then came Gaza. Ann was no longer driving, but I picked her up every Saturday morning, and she sat in her chair, determined as ever, holding a protest sign until just before her final months. We remember Ann as an activist, but she was also my dear friend. Perhaps most special to me was the time we spent just sitting in her backyard with a glass of wine, talking and doing absolutely nothing.
Annie was my first friend in Arlington when we moved here more than 30 years ago, and she introduced herself to me at a First Parish UU coffee hour. Soon, she and I bonded as mothers of daughters of similar ages, healthcare professionals, activists, and adventurers. Several New England camping and cabin trips followed, daughters in tow, and always Annie's and Hannah's dog of the time. I followed in her steps and joined Arlington United for Justice with Peace. The MLK birthday celebration event has always been one of my favorite gatherings in Arlington. And I'm so happy we are honoring Annie tonight for her work, her dedication, and her activism on behalf of people of all colors, creeds, and faiths.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. My friend Annie was an adventurer with purpose. She was endlessly curious about the world and would travel to witness for herself the marvels and the devastations. From Costa Rica to band birds for research, to Papua New Guinea to experience the oldest of human ways, Annie expected to participate to the best of her abilities. She didn't just want to observe, but also to deeply take it in and feel all the feelings associated with her environment. I was fortunate to share a few of her adventures. I have particularly fond memories of traveling by bus through central Mexico, which was primarily a bird-watching pilgrimage for Annie. She planned everything. She was a great planner, attending to every detail, but also leaving room for spontaneity. She was unafraid to try out her Spanish, wanting to connect with everyone around her, and she was on a mission to try the local food specialties. She was particularly excited to eat nopales, which is cactus, which she loved. And she also tried chapulines, or grasshoppers, crunchy and sprinkled on top of tacos, which I'm not sure she liked, but she loved to brag about it. In her later 70s, Anne found a guided historical and cultural tour that helped her realize a longtime dream of hers, a trip through the Jim Crow South and landmarks of the Civil Rights era. She took in sites with deeply painful histories and also sites that allowed her to walk in the footsteps of leaders that she had long admired. These and other adventures fed her spirit and connected her to the realities of our world. For her dedication to what is right and just and true, Annie will forever be a role model for me.
Good evening, everyone. I am a Winja. Wangari Maathai, the Kenyan Nobel Peace Prize winner and founder of the Green Belt movement, often told a story about a day in the forest when a fire broke out. All the forest creatures fled to safety, all that is except the hummingbird. She flew to the river, collected water in her beak, and dropped it on the fire. Over and over, she continued. The larger animals scoffed, asking her, "What do you think you're doing? You're too small for such a big task." Without stopping, she said, "I am doing the best I can." Anne was a hummingbird. She was family to me and to my community in Kenya. She visited my village in Kenya several times. She helped bring water to a place where access was scarce. She sent books and National Geographic magazines to children so that they could see beyond their immediate surrounding. She took photographs, creating lasting memories for the people in the village she met. When she visited a children's home that she loved and noticed that the diet was primarily starch or carbohydrates, as you guys call it, she raised funds to start a chicken project. Because of that, the kids have eggs for protein, something small but significant. After her passing, my son, through tears, said something I'll never forget. I always felt that Anne was my voice, speaking out to ensure I could be safe when walking out there. And across the ocean at the children's home she loved, one of the children said, I always felt that someone in America cared for me. Now with Anne gone, I don't feel that anymore. Anne did not just act, she connected. She made people feel seen, heard, validated, and loved. Her work was not loud, but it was powerful, like the hummingbird, tirelessly carrying drops of water to fires of anguish and despair. So today, as we honor Anne's life and legacy, I invite you to embrace a spirit of compassion and determination. Be the one who shows up when it's easier to look away. Be the voice for those who cannot speak. Be the hand that lifts someone who has fallen. Carry water, drop it on the fires that you see. You might think your efforts are small, but remember, it's not about the size of the act. It is about the courage to do something. Do the best you can. Be a hummingbird. Thank you.
To conclude this tribute, I'd like to invite Hannah Ann's daughter up to the stage to accept a plaque from the committee. And I'll just take a moment to read the plaque. It says, the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Celebration Committee, a Community Recognition Award, presented posthumously to Ann Mathis to acknowledge her outstanding commitment and dedication as an advocate and activist for justice, peace, and equity. Hannah, thank you for loaning your mother even for a little while.
Thank you, Hannah, for coming. I know this must be terribly emotional for you, but I appreciate you coming, and your mother is certainly very proud of you. She loved you dearly. She loved her grandchildren, and I was always, when I think of Ann, I'm so taken aback. When Hannah was having her second child on one floor in the hospital, she had to bring the child up to greet their grandmother, who was in the very last moments of her life. And I thought, this couldn't have been planned better, because Ann, that was the one thing she said to me, I want to live long enough to see my grandchildren. And that happened. So Hannah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Your mother couldn't have been more than 100 pounds soaking wet, but I'm telling you, she was a dynamo. I just loved her. We did so much together, and those display cases that you see, she used to come and work with Janice Bakey and myself, and put something special in the display cases. One time, she was so sick, and I said, Ann, please don't come. No, I'm coming. Well, let me come and get you. No. And she came right along and insisted upon helping with. She had such a spirit, and we were all much better for having spent some time with Ann. The music. It's time for the music. So I'm going to present to you the People's Baptist Church of Boston, the men's chorus under the direction of Marcia Scott. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, the men haven't been singing that long, but my goodness, they're so wonderful. Each and every one of them is such a talent. So I'm going to invite them to come. And I said to Marcia, the Arlington people love male choirs. They just love, so they're going to embrace you, and we're going to have a time. If you want to stand and clap, that's quite all right. We don't mind. Yeah. Don't we need some light here? Oh, there's the light.
How's everybody doing? You made it. Yeah.
What is our first song? There you go. Oh, freedom.
He said, what's the first song?
All right, today's first song for us is Oh, Freedom.
Oh,
in my heart, I will pray. The Jordan River is chilly and cold. It chills the body, but not the soul. There is but one train upon this track. It runs to heaven and right back. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. And every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
Next year, they'll probably have 4 or 5 for you. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you very much. Our introduction of our guest speaker, Neil Osborne. And our guest speaker is Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson. And I listened to Kellie's latest book on, what do you call it, Audible? And it's, it takes a little time, but the book is absolutely, absolutely fabulous. And I was telling her, there are a lot of wonderful things in the book, but one of the things I do remember is her saying that white supremacists are like a scarecrow out in the field, and the racists rest upon its arms like black crows. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful thing for me to remember of all the things that are in her book, though, but that one really struck me because it's something I can see. All right, Neil, excuse me.
Thank you, Pearl.
Yeah.
Good evening again. I've been given the honor of introducing our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson. Dr. Carter Jackson is a Michael and Dennis Kellen 1968 Associate Professor and Chair in the Department of Africana Studies at Wellesley College. She is the author of an award-winning book, Force and Freedom, Black Abolitionists and the Politics of Violence. Her most recent work, the critically acclaimed We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance, examines a racial reframing of the past and present of Black resistance, both nonviolent and violent, to white supremacy. We Refuse was listed as one of the best books of 2024 by 8 different publications and organizations. Dr. Carter Jackson's essays have been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, The Guardian, the Los Angeles Times, NPR, and other outlets. She has also been interviewed for her expertise on Netflix, Apple TV, Good Morning America, CBS News, MSNBC, PBS, Vox, CNN, and BBC, and a host of documentaries. Dr. Carter Jackson served as a historian in the residency of the Museum of African American History in Boston from 2021 to 2024. She also serves as a commissioner for the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Lastly, Dr. Carter Jackson loves a good podcast. She is a co-host of the podcast This Day in Esoteric Political History with Jody Engving, I'm mispronouncing, and Nikki Hemmer. Dr. Carter Jackson, she could probably pronounce her co-host properly. Thank you very much.
It's Avergan, Jody Avergan. Nobody ever gets his last name. I want to say thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me here. I am so honored. When Melissa, Sister Pearl's daughter, reached out to me, I was like, absolutely, I will do anything for you. So I am so grateful that Sister Pearl brought me here because it is just a treat. And I want to thank everyone who came out tonight. It is cold. It is snow outside. It is, a school night. And you are here with us, and I am so grateful for that. For the entire MLK committee that put this together, for the town of Arlington, I am just in your debt. I'm so happy that my husband is also here with me today, too, Nathaniel. I'm putting him on the spot, but he probably doesn't like that. But I'm grateful that he's here. I tell people all the time that I have, 10 jobs. I'm the chair of my department, I'm a professor, I'm a wife and a mom of 3, a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. I do 2 different podcasts. I'm really busy. I need a clone, really. I'm chronically exhausted. But what I want people to really know me by is the fact that I am a storyteller. Formerly we call that historians, but I see myself as like a griot, a storyteller. And so this evening I want to share stories with you from We Refuse. So let's get started without further ado. When my great-grandmother, Arnesta, was about 9 years old, she stepped on a rusty nail. And not long after infection began to set in, she likely contracted tetanus, a serious bacterial infection that causes painful muscle spasms and can lead to death if untreated. Her mother, Mary Bullard, was frantic. Arnesta was her only child, and she was going to lose her if she did not act fast. Mary sent Arnesta to the only doctor she knew, a white man who lived in a big house on the other side of town. The white doctor offered to help, but in exchange, Arnesta would have to live with him for the rest of her life, working for his family. In rural Alabama in 1915, during one of the worst periods of race relations in America, these were the detestable but predictable terms of engagement. Mary, who was panic-stricken and not wanting to lose her daughter to death, agreed. Thankfully, Arnesta's grandmother, a former slave, intervened and refused the doctor's proposal. And I want to pause for a second because in Thanksgiving, so just like 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, I didn't know what my great-great-great-grandmother's name was. And I found out after the book had come out, that her name was Martha. So I want to say her name tonight because so many times when we do the field of history, there's so many names that just get forgotten. And so I'm honored to be able to say my great-great-grandmother's name tonight, Martha. Martha refused the doctor's proposal. She picked up her ailing granddaughter and took her home. I imagine she went to her cupboard, but perhaps more likely she went into her garden. And there she administered every natural remedy at her disposal. Arnesta survived, but for the rest of her life, she walked with a limp. Whatever space she entered, whatever path she took, she was marked by a violent racial imprint. My mother told me this story as a child to explain my great-grandmother's limp. It was not until I was an adult that I realized that the rusty nail was not the root of her trauma. This story has always gripped me for several reasons. First, Arnesta was a child, her mother's only child. How could a doctor refuse a dying child medical care when it was in his ability to heal her? He had abandoned his oath. First, do no harm. Second, nearly 50 years out from slavery, white folks still felt entitled to Black labor and life in perpetuity. Clearly, everything was transactional to this white doctor. Built into the deal he offered was a lifetime of servitude and likely physical and sexual abuse. Sometimes, I think white supremacy in America can be summed up by these two diabolical options: live a life in bondage or refuse and limp. To be Black in America is to live life with a limp. My great-grandmother's outcome had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with power. The power of the white doctor to neglect and attempt to exploit a little Black girl who came to him for help. But my book is not about the white doctor or people like him. In many ways, Refuse is about my great-great-great-grandmother's response, Martha's refusal. It is about her rescue to save my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, myself, and even my daughters. Her refusal was not just no, but never. Refusal is a forceful no. It is a no that is packed full of energy and meaning. We refuse is similar to Black colloquialisms such as nah, or nope, or not today, Satan, or my personal favorite, oh, hell no. I was recently asked about the difference between resistance and refusal. For me, resistance is how one responds to white supremacy, but refusal is why. Refusal abhors oppression and insists on defining how humanity should be treated with dignity, respect, and decency. Non-verbally, refusal is a halting hand or a pointed finger waving from side to side or a powerful raised fist. It is a barrier that prevents oppressed people from being consumed. And while refusal can be enacted by an individual, which is pretty rough right here, this woman snatching his face, but at its heart, refusal is collective, which is why the sentiment behind the phrase, we refuse, persists among subjugated people and is a key refrain in Black feminist politics as well as Native politics. Black women have refused to be invisible or small. And this entire book is made up of examples of Black people refusing lies, theft, violence, mockery, or second-class citizenship. It shows how refusal denies whiteness and white supremacy its unearned power and authority. And since the 16th century, Black history has become a history of refusal. Last summer, I took my first trip to Ghana, and I traveled to the Gold Coast to visit Elmina, one of the largest slave dungeons built by the Portuguese. And on the wall, just adjacent to a cell where they kept rebellious Africans, who they left to die a slow death, is a plaque. And on it reads, "We are the children of those who refused to die." We are the children of those who refuse to die. From the moment the slave ships left the coast of Africa for the New World, Black people refused to die. And some even forfeited their lives because they refused to live in the conditions created by their white captors. In the 17th century, Queen Anna Njinga of the Kingdom of Ndongo, present-day Angola, refused the terms and broken treaties of the Portuguese and fought for decades against the enslavement of her people. In the 18th century, people like Elizabeth Freeman, who upon hearing the Declaration of Independence read out loud, refused to be denied her right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. As an enslaved person living in Massachusetts, she took to the courts and sued for her freedom and won. In the 19th century, Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831 was a collective refusal. During the uprising, enslaved people killed nearly 60 white men, women, and children. They killed their enslavers because they refused to be kept in bondage. They killed white children because they refused to let them grow up to perpetuate the system by becoming slaveholders. Enslaved people refused to be enslaved, even when their efforts to gain freedom failed. Even Black children refuse. During the 1950s and 60s, the American flag was used as a symbol during the Civil Rights Movement. In a sea of Confederate flags all throughout the South, the American flag reminded the nation that Black people were Americans. Here, 5-year-old Anthony was protesting alongside his mother for her right to vote in Mississippi. Turned away from seeing the governor, an officer attempted to snatch Anthony's flag from his hand. His mother called to him, "Anthony, don't let that man take your flag. Anthony, don't let that man take your flag." These are the stories of Black women and men and children who refused white supremacy. So a word on nonviolence. We Refuse offers a fundamental shift in how we understand and talk about Black people's responses to white supremacy. Often, when Black people are up against white violence, society presents them with two options. Are you going to be violent, like Malcolm X, or are you going to be nonviolent, like MLK? Are you going to burn it all down, or are you going to forgive? Nonviolence or violence, these are the choices. And nonviolence is based on the principle that one can morally persuade their oppressor to have a pang of conscience or conviction regarding their wrongness. Nonviolence uses compassion and empathy and morality to compel another's humanity. But I take issue with how the binary of nonviolence and violence has controlled the praxis and narrative by which oppressed people combat their oppression. Nonviolence on its own is not expansive enough to rectify the harm that has been caused by racism. And promoting and celebrating nonviolence as the only acceptable form of resistance is rife with handicaps. For example, while my ancestors' remedy for Arnesta might fall under the category of nonviolence, since no one physically harmed the doctor for making his proposal, my ancestors' refusal was complex, and it is too reductive to throw it in a pile labeled nonviolence. My ancestors' refusal was fundamental to her granddaughter's survival. First, she refused the doctor's proposal. Then she sought every natural remedy she possessed to stop the infection and heal Arnesta's body. She did not plead or bargain with the doctor. She did not try to convince him that Arnesta was a child or human. Her refusal, remedy, and protection transcended violence or nonviolence. She took the doctor out of the equation. The doctor had no compassion for the child. He could not be morally persuaded. Violence against him would have been a death sentence for them all, but nonviolence would have also ensured my great-grandmother's death. White supremacy and anti-Blackness are always violent, and the constant refrain is for the harmed to forget violence, forgive injury, and forfeit their agency. Sisters and brothers and siblings here tonight, I am here to tell you that we have more than two options. Black people need not choose between certain death or a life in bondage. We have, throughout history, approached such violence with an array of responses and refusals. So, for too long, I think our only model has been that of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and many of King's beliefs have been diluted at best or perverted at worst. American society presents a whitewashed version of nonviolence that speaks nothing of white supremacy, capitalism, or militarism. And I often find that King's beliefs were not wrong, but merely incomplete. They do not always encompass the full range of human responses that people engage in, particularly in the face of death. King's 6 principles do not address reparations, which may not be purely monetary, or how to repair the harm from white supremacy. How do people heal? Not after breaking a bone or stepping on a rusty nail, but after losing a loved one, land, wealth, health, after psychological trauma. And in a spiritual and secular sense, King's 6 principles do not address repentance. What does it look like to turn from the ways of an oppressor? What does it look like to relinquish power? These missing principles are what activists today are still trying to navigate. Not how we employ Black harm for transformation, but how do we mitigate harm altogether? Today, nonviolence has dwindled down to marches. And when a Black man, woman, or child is killed by racial violence, people march. But marches do not keep Black people alive. Marches honor the dead. Marches are public mourning and not public policy. And whenever racial altercations gain traction in the media, pundits and politicians alike are quick to point to King as the model for doing protests the right way. After racial violence results in the death, the media's question will be, will the protests be peaceful? Or an even more egregious question, does the victim's family forgive the perpetrator? Marches, forgiveness, peaceful protests, they're all shorthand or callbacks to King. But nonviolence today means something different than what King intended. Now, it is a performance of passive power that almost ensures that those in power never structurally change. And here goes what Miss Sister Pearl loves. White supremacy does not believe in nonviolence because it does not believe in Black humanity. To white supremacy, nonviolence is a scarecrow. And racists rest like crows on its outstretched arms. Nonviolence alone could never sufficiently frighten or endanger political, economic, or social institutions. So now a word on violence. Violence is more than the engine of white supremacy. Violence is an entire ecosystem. Violence is a tool employed to harm, deny, restrict, neglect, and separate and deceive. Notably, it can be a means to various ends. It can be used to enforce white supremacy or to overthrow a government. Violence is slavery and segregation. Violence is theft and hoarding. Violence is replacing the truth with conspiracy. Violence is rupture and separation. Violence occupies the space of a system, an ideology, a culture, and a language. Violence can take many forms, and Black people spend much of their lives, if not their entire lives, combating, addressing, avoiding, and subverting white violence. And it is impossible to write a book that offers a critical analysis on violence and does not interrogate white supremacy as the lead perpetrator. We demand that people of color remain nonviolent, but we fail to ask the most important question. Why are white Americans so violent? Why are white Americans so violent? I want to be clear. We Refuse is not about advocating violence, but I am encouraging people to grapple with the causes and consequences of it, to think outside of the binary of violence and nonviolence. The refusals and remedies offered in my book are equally not about revenge. The work of revenge is ridiculous. Consider this. Never have Americans ever heard of Black men bombing a white church and killing 4 little white girls before a service. Never have Americans ever heard of a Black man being assassinated or assassinating a white man in his driveway in front of his family, as with Medgar Evers. Never have Americans ever heard of a Black man being invited into a white church for a prayer meeting where they treated him kindly and then they were gunned down, all the white churchgoers gunned down. Never have Americans ever heard of a Black mob attempting to overthrow the elected government of the United States at the Capitol. Vengeance is a white imaginary project. Only in film or fiction could one conjure a story where Black people take folks hostage and blow up neighborhoods and kill all the white people. Black people are not consumed with revenge, but justice. And white people are not afraid of revenge, they are afraid of justice, because justice is more costly. Violence harms everyone, even white people. I tell a story in my book about my great-grandfather, James Price. He and his wife, Rosa, had 16 children together and lived in Darlove, Mississippi. I found out later that he actually had 19 children from a previous relationship, and I thought that was hilarious because he was in his 70s saying, I could have more, I could have more. It's like, whoa, slow down there, Grandpa. But together, him and his wife, Rosa, had 16 children. Living in Mississippi, they all picked cotton. It was the 1930s. And one day, while James was out driving his car, a little white boy darted out in front of him and was killed instantly. The accident happened in broad daylight with many witnesses. In any other scenario, my grandfather would have been lynched on the spot. His family would have been exiled, if not violently attacked. James was terrified. But quickly, word spread around town that while James had killed this little boy, it was an accident. He and his family were not to be harmed. Even the little boy's family defended James. My family said it was a miracle. Only the Lord. The town said it was James' upstanding character and reputation as a good man. I suspect the truth was more sinister. James, Rosa, and their 16 children were cheap, reliable labor during the height of the Great Migration. Here's the thing, capitalism is also violence. It makes even little white boys who get in the way expendable. And this year, many white people and those who aspire to whiteness will find out just how expendable they are. My great-grandfather was not being protected. He was being exploited. And the white boy who got caught in the cogs of capital missed a valuable lesson. In this white supremacist capitalist world, the boy should have looked both ways. Whiteness and capitalism are not compelled by suffering, but consumed with inflicting it. White supremacy in its core and in its direct manifestations is violence. And building on Toni Morrison's famous 1975 Portland State University speech, in which she said, racism is a distraction because it keeps you from doing your work, literary critic Sandy Alexander described anti-Black racism that arises from white supremacy as not merely a thorn in a person's side, it is also a suffocating knee on a person's neck. And during the summer of 2020, she argued racism was so distracting, it deprioritized a whole global pandemic. She says racism has been so flagrantly murderous that it has absolutely no qualms about being caught on camera. In fact, it will pose for it. We Refuse focuses on Black people's response to white supremacy, and it reframes the conversation away from the rightness and wrongness of nonviolence and violence, and instead focuses on what works. I focus on Black women because I'm in agreement with the Combahee River Collective, which states, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression. We Refuse examines 5 ways that Black men and women have successfully engaged white supremacy beyond nonviolence. I study revolution, protection, force, flight, and joy. And I readily admit that even these broad categories are not exhaustive, but in We Refuse, I hope to uncover them as a set of possibilities among many. For me, revolution is about forfeiture and a new beginning. As we've seen in the Haitian Revolution, it is about replacing broken systems with just systems. Protection is best understood through the efforts of the abolitionist movement on the Underground Railroad. Black people and white people protected family, friends, and fugitives from the violence of slavery and the snare of slave catchers. Force looks at how Black people employed their Second Amendment rights to protect themselves from the violence of the Klan. And flight looks at Black people who left, maybe temporarily or maybe forever, but always in search of belonging. And lastly, I study the potency of joy. I contend that the opposite of violence is not nonviolence. In America, the opposite of violence is the fullness of Black humanity bound together with joy. I chose these 5 categories of Black response because throughout my life, I have witnessed, researched, or experienced the utility of them all. Their impacts can blend into one another. Sometimes revolutions involve force. Sometimes flight is motivated by protection. Sometimes force and flight are joyful. Many people will remember the viral footage of a brawl that took place in Montgomery, Alabama at a riverfront park in August of 2023. And I remember this vividly because I was actually coming home from Ghana, and I was headed to the airport, and my friend is like, "Girl, are you checking your phone?" And I was like, "No, should I be?" She was like, "Go to Twitter right now, go to Black Twitter." So I go and I see the footage of this altercation. A Black dock worker was attacked by several white men who refused to abide his instructions to move their boat. The white attackers shoved the Black man and began to overwhelm him. In minutes, dozens of nearby Black men and women joined the fight to help the dock worker by jumping on the white assailants and landing blows in return, including one teenager who jumped from a boat and swam to the dock to defend him, and another Black man who swung a folding chair at white attackers to fend them off from harming more people. Within hours, the internet exploded with GIFs and jokes and reenactments and memes and even merch to celebrate the resistance to white violence. One white man was dragged to the point where his Crocs became socks. My personal favorites were Fade in the Water, referring to the 16-year-old boy as Malcolm Phelps or Aquaman. A quote by Shirley Chisholm that said, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." I recently actually found out, fun fact, that the folding chair was actually invented by a Black man named Nathaniel Alexander in 1911. And I was like, of course we invented the folding chair. Sounds about right. Collectively, both in person and virtually, Black people were refusing violent treatment from white voters. Black people rejected ill treatment. They protected each other. They used force to stop their attackers. They ran toward trouble, and they celebrated and laughed and memorialized Black refusal with relentless joy and mockery. Poking fun at whiteness robs it of its legitimacy. Humor undoes the authority of white supremacy. It reveals its irrationality. The lessons of refusal and joy were bound up on that Alabama dock. The initial response to an altercation like Montgomery is anger. And don't dismiss this. Theologian James Cone contended, anger and humor are like the left and right arm. They complement each other. Anger empowers the poor to declare their uncompromising opposition to oppression, and humor prevents them from being consumed by their fury. A deep and nuanced conversation on the implications of white violence is overdue. We have failed to examine the violence that Black people are responding to in their communities. We have dismissed the rock thrower, the looter, the graffiti artist, and the poet. Not all Black responses are violent, and not all Black responses are nonviolent either. Throughout history, Black people have employed a plethora of tools to combat anti-Blackness. And these categories do the work of expanding nonviolence and, in some cases, giving credence to violence when it works. Liberation is forceful, but that does not make freedom illegitimate. It simply makes it hard. My great-great-great-grandmother, Martha, refused the metaphorical fork in the road. She stomped out a new trail for Ernesta. She rejected dehumanization. Understanding a different path forward means asking different questions and being willing to accept hard solutions. So if you are like me, you might be thinking about the state of the world, the state of politics, the inauguration, Gaza, Haiti, Sudan, academia, the state of our climate or healthcare system, the state of our prison system, the state of our educational system, and you might be angry. You should be. Anger is useful. Audre Lorde argues anger prevents you from being stagnant and resigned. Anger is the engine of refusal. But our anger should never be left alone. It must be tethered to hope, and hope is tethered to joy. Hope and joy stem from a place of purpose and promise. Wendell Erdman Berry is a writer, a farmer, an environmentalist activist, and he argues that when it comes to fixing societal problems, people often want a solution as large scale as the problem. But rarely can any major problem be solved in this way. Instead, he suggested what is needed is countless small solutions that can chip away at the core issues. And I was reminded of this when I was thinking about the woman who talked about the hummingbird, just pouring a little water, doing the best that we can. Countless small solutions. But small interpersonal solutions do not satisfy America's need for drama. At a surface level, refusal and joy does not feel adequate. At best, it can feel dismissive. At worst, like salt in a wound. But refusal is not a simple declaration. It is a verb. And joy is not mere optimism or ease. It is a conviction that nothing big or small can be tackled without first believing it is possible. I think about the small but powerful ways we can refuse and find joy to combat violent systems. I think about MLK, especially today, and what he might say. And I can't put words in his mouth, but I can use his own words, which I think are prescient. He says, "These are revolutionary times. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal opposition to poverty and racism and militarism." I'm so encouraged by that. And I'm also encouraged to see a side of MLK that we don't often see. Over the weekend, as I was preparing for this lecture, I started to Google images of MLK. And if you put in Google search, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Jamaica, this is what you will see. You will see the king, the Reverend Doctor, in a pool, shirtless, with Coretta, lounging, relaxing, walking on the beach with his wife, taking in a Mai Tai. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's here in Jamaica where King says, "Here I feel like a human being, like a human being." And it reminded me of the remedy of flight and what it means to escape, to get away, to find a place where you can be, to find a place where you can belong, to get rest, and then prepare yourself to get ready to tap back into the fight. I appreciate the fact that King could have left our country. He could have stayed in Jamaica, but he chose to come back again and again and fight the good fight. So I want to close, and I want to close with my epilogue, and since we're talking about swimming and pools and the beach, I think this is an appropriate way to close this lecture. I'm going to mention a story that my husband told me. When he was in high school, he took a summer job as a lifeguard, working at a local beach. And during his training, his instructors discussed what to do if they spotted someone drowning. If a person was panicking, he needed to be careful. A person who was flailing could drown a lifeguard by attempting to jump on them and even push them underwater. If the panicking, drowning person was bigger than them, this could be a real problem. The instructor's guidance was simple. Let them drown. It is better to rescue a person after they've lost consciousness than to risk being pulled under. Once unconscious, they can be safely rescued and brought to the shore, and then a lifeguard or a paramedic can conduct CPR and resuscitate them. Let them drown. Seems harsh, but I understood the rationale behind it. A panicked person is a danger to themselves and others. I think about this principle often. It is though white Americans are lounging in a community pool, propped up by all kinds of floaties because they cannot swim. They fear someone, a woman or an immigrant, is going to remove a device that allows them to float. So they scream, they splash, they kick, and lose their balance. White people fear the loss of their superiority, advantage, and safety. They are irrational. They do not need to hoard the floaties. In fact, they can just stand up and the water will be at their waist. But they do not trust anyone. They are kicking and punching and flailing their arms in a panic. In a toxic political environment, I ask myself, how should we approach these people? Do we let them drown? What does that look like? What would that mean for American democracy? Letting someone drown is a refusal to engage a panicked person. Many Black people know what rescue and resuscitation looks like in a democracy. It is the work and activism that Black men and women do daily at our jobs, in our communities, and for our families. And there is nothing good in America that can be accomplished without our labor and our intellect. When we refuse, revolt, quit, leave, withhold, strike, boycott, or simply carve out spaces that deny the white gaze, institutions must concede. Allowing the drowning is the demand that white people must relinquish their hold on power and violence and control. The warning before calling out is to say, let go, stand up. You are not dying. When America is rescued and resuscitated, then people will have to answer the hard questions. How do we engage each other as human beings? When Jamaica Kincaid wrote A Small Place regarding her fraught understanding of her relationship to the island of her native home, Antigua, she concluded by writing about Christopher Columbus's discovery of the island of Antigua in 1493. She concluded by writing by referring to European settlers and slaveholders as rubbish, and all enslaved people as noble and exalted. In her mind, there was nothing to contest. Men and women who engaged in the practice of slavery were trash, and people who were enslaved were honorable and even morally superior. But when slavery collapsed, everyone had to reckon with their own humanity and the humanity of others. Kincaid acknowledged this. Once you cease to be a master, you are no longer human rubbish. You are just a human being, and all that adds up to you. The same could be said of the enslaved. Once you are no longer slaves, once you are free, you are no longer noble and exalted. You are just a human being. White, Black, or Native, with slavery, there are no human beings. For people to become human, slavery needed to be eradicated. Black people, unafraid to act, were willing to trade in their identity as noble and exalted slaves to be human. But too many white Americans have settled into their identity as rubbish. For too many, it is better to be hated than to be human. In 1993, science fiction author Octavia Butler published a book called Parable of the Sower about an apocalyptic United States that is ravished with corrupt leadership and deadly plagues and fires and rampant violence, all in the year of 2024. If you've ever read this book, it's pretty freaky. But at the start of each chapter, she has these little tiny epigraphs. And at the start of one chapter, she wrote, "Drowning people sometimes die fighting their rescuers." Drowning people sometimes die fighting their rescuers. Black Americans and other people of color cannot risk their lives saving someone who is unwilling to recognize the harm their panic is causing. The wise lifeguard will watch and wait. And it can be agonizing, but waiting is not careless. The refusal is not so much a no as a not now. When the hysterical swimmer grows tired and weary and weak and is just on the brink of unconsciousness, then and only then will the lifeguard rescue them from the water. In this chaotic world that Americans live in, Black people can pull in the heavy, unconscious bodies of extremism and hope that their revival from a near-death experience will be transformative. Or we can let whiteness drown in the violence of their own making. But when we refuse, it is in our power to determine how best we can preserve our lives and the lives of others. So finally, I want to return to my ancestor, Ernesta, who refused and limped. But I forgot to tell you that the limp was not the totality of who she was. She lived, she loved, she actually married 5 times. She laughed. This is a picture of her and my grandfather in the kitchen. She left Alabama and moved to Michigan. She protected her family as best she could. She poured into the lives of others and into the life of my mother. This is my mother at age 3 years old. Ernesta refused, and in her refusal, she found joy. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I recognize a lot from your book. You have just heard a little bit of her book, We Refuse. There are so many stories in that book that will stir your heart. I encourage you to get a hold of a copy. We Refuse. We only have about a dozen of them here, but you know what to do with your books. Before we close for the evening, I really must tell you that I am so happy this evening to have been able to bring this program to you. And it's not just myself. I want to make sure I give everyone credit for this evening. And I'm going to start with our committee. When we decided, well, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this, there were a few folks that we had to get in touch with that could help us. And one person is Lee Finner. And Lee is here, and Lee retired for a little bit from the program. She moved out of the area. But I called her and I says, Lee, please, I need your help. And she never even hesitated for a moment, and she said, yes, I'll be more than happy to help you. And she did this for us. She did the program. So I would very much like to thank her. There wasn't any way it was going to get done other than if Lee were to do it, and she did. And Swifty Printers did the printing, and we thank them. We paid for it, but I don't think probably as much as we may have had to. And under special thanks on page 17 in your book, there are several people that you need to look at. This evening in particular, the Arlington Police Department is here. The police chief always attends the programs, and Julianne Flaherty is here. Where is she? And also her captain has come, and there are other policemen that have come to enjoy the evening with us. And also I'd like to thank Patsy Kramer, who is responsible for the use of this wonderful area. And she's been very helpful. She has walked me through this whole thing because I usually don't, my job has always been get a speaker, get the music, get the clergy, and then all these other things the rest of the committee did. So this time I had to kind of catch up. And there were a lot of things that Patsy told me had to be done. You need a license to serve food. You need a permit to use the building. You need one thing or another. So Patsy held my hand and walked me through that. So thank you very much. And also the Arlington Public Schools, the Visual Art Department, our past president, Crystal Haynes, Copperthorne, and our past secretary, Jillian Harvey, and our past, she wasn't the secretary, but Teresa Mazzelli, I know she helped me with them, and also did the display cases. And Jeff Monroe and James Milan, who work for the Arlington Community Media, we thank you very much. They're the ones that televise the program, do all of this sound work, and we appreciate that. We have to say that the cable companies is having a struggle, like most businesses, and if you have an opportunity to gift them with a donation, please do that. And I'm sure you'll be able to find, you Google, and you'll find where you can be a blessing to them. We just thank them very much. They have done this year after year. I've never mentioned anything about their supporting them financially, but they are having a struggle. So thank you. And the committee, Regina Keynes. Regina is having some health issues now, so she's not with us this evening. Maggie, where's Maggie? Maggie, I know. Come, why don't you folks come up and join me here? And Kate Kubeda. Kate does all of our writing, and she's our secretary. She keeps the minutes. Kate baked you a beautiful pound cake this evening. Yeah. Andrew Fisher, Robin Gottlieb, Scott Jones, Roberta Lasky, who was our treasurer, Liz Lawrence, and Neil. You've met Neil and myself. So here are the folks that have helped out. They've made this. Yeah. Come up, guys. Yeah. Come on. Come on. Yeah. I learned from my pastor, Dr. Roberts, that you always give credit to work well done. Every single Sunday after he has his sermon, he gives credit to each and every one that has made the day wonderful. So I want to thank you folks. I thank you very much. You really came to the rescue. You stepped up to the plate and all those other little mundane remarks. But I really thank you. You've worked very hard. I hope you enjoyed the evening. And we'll be meeting in a couple of weeks, so we'll plan to do this again. But you see, this is it. We need members. We need people to come and work with us and make this program successful and other things that we do during the year. You need to, if you have the heart, you have a little time, would you kindly join us so we can probably even do more than what we do. We're all just volunteers, but we really, honest and truly, need your assistance. And Neil wrote a very compelling letter. Where is that letter now? Is it on our website? Is it on the website? All right, if not, it will be. Take a peek at it, gives you a little bit of information about our group, and please consider joining us. We certainly would appreciate your talent and your time. All right, thank you, folks. Thank you very much. There's lots of refreshments left. We hope you'll help yourself before you leave to go home. And also take note on the wall of those wonderful businesses in Arlington that have provided the pastries. And we just can't thank them enough. They've been wonderful supporters of ours. All right, okay. Lift every voice and sing. And I believe, Lee, the words are in here, right? Yeah, okay. Yes, on page 13. Lift every voice and sing. Marcia, you in the choir, going to help us out with this? Come on, choir. Come on, quiet. After that, we have our benediction. Reverend Ross Goodman, pastor of St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming. And I look forward to seeing all of you next year. All right. We need some more light. Yeah, we need, who's in charge of light? Who does light?
With
encountered 5 beautifully dressed men singing a song, and it was the most spiritual experience I've ever had in a men's room in my entire life. Thank you very much. So here's a brief benediction. With the voice of a prophet did Martin Luther King Jr. say on August 28, 1963, before a crowd of 250,000 people in our nation's capital, we have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time to make the real promise of democracy. With the voice of a preacher did Martin Luther King Jr. also say, with faith we will be able to go on to carve a tower of hope on the mountain of despair and bring into being that great dream and create right here in America a nation where all will live together and respect the dignity and worth of the human personality. On this day of remembrance and inspiration, also a day when our mountain of despair seems to have grown higher, may we yet carve that tower of hope on the mountain of despair and anger with the fierce urgency of now. Thank you, God, for Dr. King's message of hope and perseverance, of refusal and resistance in the face of adversity, that through faith, even in the most difficult situations, we can build a better future where everyone is respected and valued as individuals made in your image. And now may the God of love and justice lavish you with grace, illumine your path, and strengthen your will this day and always. Amen.
Thank you.